Okay, well, now I know that the accountants out there are saying, oh goody, we're going to do a story on numbers. I love stories on numbers. I love stories on numbers. And the rest of you are toying with the thought of saying, dude, just wake me up when it's over. How boring is that? But I know you're not really actually thinking that because you're a very highly intelligent group that watches this. I know, I read your emails, I hear your voicemails. And if you were the type who watched, I don't know, other stations, other newscasts, I might have to do something ridiculous to get you interested. They really went over the top with that one. But I know you're not like that, so I know we don't have to do that. I know you understand how important this stuff is, whether you're interested in the environment or housing or the homeless or gun control or semiconductors or any number of topics. Those all involve money. And a lot of that money comes from taxpayers. But the supply is not endless. The state cannot spend money it does not have, with the exception of bonds, which, hold that thought, I'll get to it in a bit. Our guide to Oregon's budget is State Senator Elizabeth Steiner, the Senate co-chair of the legislature's Ways and Means Committee. Big job? Big job.
Being co-chair is a big job.
Yeah.
We run a $32 billion general and lottery fund budget for the biennium, and my partner, Representative Sanchez, and I are primarily responsible for allocating all that.
First, let's take a look at where the money comes in for the state budget. This graphic is from the Oregon Fiscal Office. We're looking at the income for the 2021-23 budget year. And see where it shows $121.165 billion total funds? Well, yes, that is a ton of money, but most of it is off limits to Oregon lawmakers. I'm showing you this to give you the full picture. That number comes from several areas, including general funds, which include all the taxes that individuals and companies pay each year. It also comes from lottery money. Yes, the state really does make $1.5 billion every 2 years off lottery players who play and lose. And it comes from other funds. That's a big chunk. It's made up of money state agencies can charge for services or licensing. That includes, among other things, a fee doctors have to pay to hold a medical license and the fee the rest of us pay for a driver's license. Finally, a big chunk comes from federal funds, which includes all the money sent to Oregon by the federal government for Medicaid or education or housing or other things. And if you wonder if the entire budget has grown, well, yes, it has. That's 1981 on the left and 2023 on the right. The top two colors represent those other funds and federal funds that lawmakers, for the most part, cannot touch in Oregon. But I can show you where that money goes. Here is the other fund spending. It goes to things like human services, there on the upper right, and the public employee retirement system, there on the left. The federal money goes mostly to the Oregon Health Authority and the Department of Human Services. But for our purposes of talking about what the Oregon legislature can spend, we're going to ignore everything besides general funds and lottery money.
Okay. So people should really just focus on, though, this $32 billion, which is general fund and lottery money.
Yes.
Because that's what you have
The $32 billion is what my colleagues in the legislature and I have control over in terms of how we allocate it. All the rest of it is dedicated and we don't have a lot of control.
Budget cycles start every 2 years, so the next budget will be 2023 through 2025. And just to make things a little bit confusing, the budget year starts on July 1st. So that means last year, agencies were figuring out how much money they'd need to keep doing all the things they're doing now. They also toss in some extra things they'd like to do if there is enough money.
I have a quick question about
Sure.
the agencies putting together the budgets. I can just hear viewers saying, well, shouldn't the agencies be looking at, do they really need to carry all these things forward, or maybe they should stop doing some things and save the taxpayers' money?
That's a great question. So agencies should look at those questions.
But do they?
They do,
Okay.
and the legislature does.
Okay.
So for example, there are programs that were included for a certain period of time, but they weren't included, for example, in the continuing service level, or CSL, that we talked about, because we weren't sure if they were going to work or not, and we want to see the data. And then if we don't see data that they're working, then we don't fund them again.
Okay, so that's the money coming into the state, billions of it, from the federal government and from fees that lawmakers can't really touch, and from the income tax and lottery money, which they can decide how to spend. For the current budget, which is done at the end of June 2023, it's roughly $29 billion. And for the next budget, which starts July 1st of 2023, The number's roughly $32 billion. But even within that big pot of money, some of it is already spent and lawmakers can't really touch it. For example, education.
What continuing service level is for K-12 education is a matter of some debate, but currently the legislature says, and the Chief Financial Office say, that it's $9.5 billion for the 23-25 biennium. The governor put $9.9 billion for it into a recommended budget. The advocates are saying another number altogether, but we have to fund, at the very least, we really have to fund at the $9.5 billion.
Okay.
And that's all general fund, basically. Well, it's some corporate activities tax money and other things, but
it's coming out of that 32.
It's coming out of that 32.
Yeah.
And then there's the Department of Corrections.
Then we have the Department of Corrections. Department of Corrections is mandatory also, right? We have to pay for the cost of every person in custody at the state level, right? And that includes all their medical care, food, clothing, paying for the corrections officers, all that kind of stuff. It's very expensive. It's about $45,000 a year.
Per person?
Per person.
Department of Corrections will cost about $2 billion for the next 2 years. So here's how the budget shakes out for Oregon. Over the next 2 years, state lawmakers have about $32 billion to work with. But take out $9.9 billion for K-12 schools, and then take out another $3.9 billion for a variety of other school-related costs. They're already down to $18.2 billion. Next, we need to take out another $10.7 billion for human services, which includes everything from the state hospital to behavioral health and raises for home health care workers paid for by the state. Now we're at $7.5 billion. Take out another $3.3 billion for public safety. That includes the Department of Corrections and state police, all the district attorney's offices, child support, the military department, and more. Then take out another $1.1 billion for the Judicial Department. That includes all the state courts along with public defense. Now we're down to $3.1 billion. Toss in the remaining budgets: natural resources, $785 million, economic development, $512 million, administrative, $372 million, legislative branch, $191 million, transportation, $155 million, and we get down to about $1 billion. Still a big number, but not really in state budgetary terms. Half of that will go to various expenses, including the $200 million the governor wanted and got for housing, and $325 million for a grab bag of expected expenses, including extra money to keep people on Medicaid if the federal funding goes away, and more money to pay public defense attorneys, along with money for an emergency fund, raises for both state and non-state workers, and bonuses for some state workers. And the other half goes to the rainy day fund. Did you notice there was no money in there for an interstate bridge? That's where something called bonding comes in. It's a chance for the state to borrow money from anyone willing to invest in its general obligation bonds. The investors give the state money up front. Then the state pays them back later with interest.
GO bonds, general obligation bonds, we can use to build stuff that the state has part ownership of. Okay. So every 2 years, something called the State Debt Policy Advisory Commission.
Well, that's a juicy title.
It's very clear, at least, what it does. Issues a report that says, here's what we think the bonding capacity of the state is for this upcoming biennium, right?
What's the capacity mean?
Means how much money can we offer? What's the total amount of general obligation bonds we can sell during the 23-25 biennium?
And why isn't it infinite?
Great question. So, we generally, in this state, follow a practice that we do not use more than 5% of general fund for what's called debt service. Okay. Debt service is, you bought that bond from me, I have to pay you back for the amount that you bought it for plus the interest, right? Because you gave me the money up front, so I'm paying you back.
Okay.
Okay? That's debt service.
So the state can sell $1.9 billion worth of general obligation bonds for the 23-25 budget. On top of that, the state can sell another $500 million in bonds backed by lottery money. So let's say a total of $2.5 billion, which sounds like a lot of money until you remember that Oregon needs to come up with $1 billion for the new bridge over the Columbia River, and the governor wants to spend more than $1 billion on housing and more on other programs. There's just not enough money for all of it.
So pretty good chance it's going to be $1 billion for the bridge?
That's the number that we've been told we have to put up. It's still under consideration. I don't want you quoting me saying that I've made any promises, but we have to put up $1 billion. So there's $1 billion from Washington, $1 billion from Oregon, probably close to $1 billion from the feds, and the rest is from tolling.
Yeah. Nobody likes to say that word.
I don't mind. I'm from the East Coast. I grew up with tolling. It's a user fee.
Yeah.
We should all be paying user fees.
And so just getting back to why it's most likely that the bridge money would come out of bonds, it's because that is a better place for the money to come out of than
cash.
Yeah.
I can't find $1 billion. We can't find $1 billion in general fund to pay for that.
Okay, so I hope that made sense. Couple of things to add in. Property tax, I forgot, that's coming in too, but that's all part of that $32 billion. And our numbers are close, but they're not exact, so don't get too hung up on that kind of stuff. Things can change. For example, there's a chance the legislature is going to try and pay for the bridge using bonds against ODOT's state highway tax fund and not the general fund. They'll use some of it maybe, but the rest would still be against the general bond. I hope that makes sense. Finally, though, there's the kicker. Now, that is money that taxpayers get back if the amount of taxes collected is at least 2% higher than the estimate at the beginning of the two-year budget cycle. So this year it will be way more than that, and the amount sent back to taxpayers will total nearly $4 billion. As you can imagine, lawmakers may be tempted to raid that fund, but they shouldn't. We'll be watching and we'll see. If it's left alone, Oregon taxpayers will most likely get a credit on their tax return next year. So, what are your thoughts on all this? Do you think lawmakers should keep that kicker refund and spend it or not? Are you surprised by anything that we put in the budget there? Let me know, will you? Send an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or you could always call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you on that.